Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our online Coast to Coral talk series for this month. This is a monthly talk series held every second Tuesday of the month. Today, we're going to be hearing about grey nurse sharks in Queensland from Dr. Carly Kilpatrick from the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service. But before we get started, I'm going to give a quick intro presentation and then introduce our speaker, and then we'll kick off. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional caretakers, the Gubbi Gubbi peoples of the land, air, and water on which this event takes place, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and emerging. My name is Shai. I'm an ambassador with Reef Check Australia. We have a few other ambassadors like Renee, who you guys can see her video. We have Julie and Terry on the line, and we have our general manager, Jody, as well on the line. We're ambassadors with Reef Check Australia. Our organization is a not-for-profit, and we're dedicated to providing ways for the community to better understand, appreciate, and protect our oceans and marine environment. If it's possible, guys, to just keep your microphones muted during the presentation, that's actually in our housekeeping. So that's right here. Back. Cool. 1 second. There we go. Yeah, so online etiquette, please, if you can keep your microphones muted, and if you keep your videos off, that would be great. It just helps with the bandwidth and the presentation running a bit smoother because of the low bandwidth out here. But we do want to take a group photo this time. So we haven't done this before. So we wanted to see if you guys wanted to turn your videos on in just about 2 minutes. Jody, our general manager, is going to take a group photo of everybody. If you don't want to be shown in the group photo and seen in the group photo, keep your video off, and you can actually change your Zoom name as well. There's an option to do that. Yeah, we were hoping to take a group photo so we can post it on our Facebook page for our future events, and also to thank Dr. Carly Kilpatrick for her time today. Regarding question and answering, you can post it in the chat box. You'll all have a row of tabs that should that you can see on your Zoom page, and there's one that's called chat, and that chat box, you can post your questions there, and we have Renee, one of our ambassadors, who's going to be moderating those questions, and she'll be taking questions and posing them to Carly throughout the talk, as well as at the end of the talk. If you want to get informed about our future events and what we're up to, please send your name and contact details to that email address that you see right there. That's SEQ, Southeast Queensland Events, at reefcheckaustralia.org, and we will add you into the mailing list. So for the group photo, if everybody wants to turn on their video really quickly, we'll let Jody take a quick group shot of all of us, and we can smile. Jody, are you ready? Give me the thumbs up. All right, on the count of 3, we'll turn on our videos and we'll all smile and say Reef Check. Not that we can hear you, but yeah, all right. 1, 2, 3. Reef Check. Cool. All right, thank you guys so much.
Guys, can I just ask one thing? I only got the first page because I can't see through the version so that I can see everyone. So because it's your screen, can you just scroll? Unless you're happy with just the first
Oh,
page.
yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, how about that? Is that better?
No, it means Charlie's screen is your screen sharing.
My screen is sharing.
Yeah.
Can you see? I scrolled down. Did you see? Can you see more people? No.
No.
Okay, we'll try it next time. How about that?
Okay. I can see.
Sorry, guys.
All good.
All right, no worries. Sorry, guys. We'll try it again next time. We'll figure out how it works, and then we'll sort it out next time. But thank you. Okay, so some recent events that we've had on. If you've missed any of the Coast to Coral events that we had last month, we had the Wonderful World of Crabs by Peter Davey from Queensland Museum. That was a great talk. We've had a talk about light pollution from Dr. Ken Wishaw. Jellyfish on the Sunshine Coast by Ray Lean from Sunshine Coast Council, which was awesome. And from Coast to Cows, which was seaweed supplements for methane reduction shadow, super interesting technology. And that was from Professor Nick Paul at USC. They're all available on our YouTube channel. So if you search Reef Check Australia on YouTube, you'll be able to find them and go ahead and watch them. Upcoming events. So this weekend is National Science Week by City of Gold Coast. So there's going to be a number of events online. You can get tickets at the Gold Coast Library's website. We actually have a talk as well on Saturday, the 15th of August, so this weekend, from 12 to 1. We're going to be talking about the Gold Coast reefs. And so tune in, you can get the Gold Coast Reef Lowdown. There's a number of events online and in person, and for more information and to register, just go to scienceweek.net.au. That's that link down there at the bottom. Another upcoming event that we have is the Horizon Festival. This is actually going on now. It's this month and into the first week of September, I believe. This is an awesome multi-art festival on the Sunshine Coast. For those of you that are here on the coast or want to drive up, there's an event going on this Friday, the 14th at 7 p.m. You can tune in to see this online creative coastal exchange showcasing music, spoken word, and visual artworks of young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists connected to the so-called Sunshine and Gold Coast. This event is an opportunity for Indigenous young people to bring coastal connections that have always existed into a new creative context. There's a range of events happening in relation to the Horizon Festival, and they all look really, really cool. So definitely encourage you guys to jump on their website, horizonfestival.com.au, and check those out. We have another upcoming event with one of our partners, Saltwater Eco Tours. They have some really cool tours taking Mooloolaba here on the Sunshine Coast, Sunday the 30th of August and Friday the 4th of September. They have 2 sunset tours. They're 2 hours each, $55 a person. And so you can join on their website. They have a Saltwater Eco Tours website and you can register there. They also have a cultural tour that's upcoming on Saturday, 5th of, I believe that's supposed to say September. Sorry about that. But that is an awesome opportunity. That will include local Indigenous storytelling and traditions, interactive demonstrations and experiences, wildlife spotting, bush tucker inspired catering, which is super cool, and they have a fully licensed bar as well. So yeah, the sunset tour includes complimentary craft beer and grazing platters, and you can watch the sunset in this beautiful part of the Sunshine Coast. So we recommend you guys go and check that out. With Beer Yoga is also back, but this time it's online. So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to join with Beer Yoga on the Sunshine Coast with our partners, Your Mates Brewery. It's a local microbrewery here, but it's a very fun event. I've attended, and this one will be online, and you can register online. It's going to be on Monday, September 28th. We'll give you guys more details in the next Coast to Coral talk about that one. All right, so our next Coast to Coral talk. This is coming up on Tuesday, 8th of September at 6:30 p.m., same time. We have Grant Hinner from Noosa Council. I've worked with Grant in the past. He's a very smart, switched on, and nice guy. Highly recommend joining in on this talk. And Craig Bohm from the Nature Conservancy, TNC, which is one of the biggest conservation groups in the world. And I think it's actually the biggest. But yeah, they're going to be talking about climate change adaptation and oyster reef restoration in the Noosa River, which is going to be super cool, super interesting. It's a very innovative project, and it's like a pilot project. There haven't been much of that done around here, so I think it's quite cool, and there's probably going to be some really good information shared. So register on our website under the Get Involved tab under Calendar. Quick shout outs. Carly today is going to be talking a lot about Wolf Rock, and Wolf Rock Dive Center, who have generously donated the photo that we used as the background for this event, are having a shark ID competition. So this is a great way to engage as citizen scientists. Jump on, as the sharks are migrating south, you can help and ID the sharks. So jump on their website, check it out. You can win a dive at Wolf Rock, which is awesome. So yeah, definitely have a look at that. Another big one that's coming out we wanted to give a shout out is Sunshine Coast Council has their coastal hazards adaptation strategy. The round 2 of community engagement is currently open. Last year, we had their team come and have a chat with us and do one of the coastal coral talks, and they spoke about the adaptation strategy and they took in feedback from our community, which is great. And now this is round 2. So we encourage everybody on the Sunshine Coast and outside to just have your say and jump on Sunshine Coast Council's website for that. Thank you always to everybody who supports our Coastal Coral Talk series: Queensland Government, Sunshine Coast Council, Port of Brisbane, City of Gold Coast, Townsville, GBRF, Sea Life Australia, Clean Water Group, and June Canavan Foundation. Thank you guys for everything you do and your support. Thank you to all of our sponsors who donate the awesome gifts that we can send our speakers. So Dr. Carly Kilpatrick can look forward to a nice little care package from our awesome sponsors. And thank you to the people behind the scenes who make these events happen and run smoothly. As always, thank you guys for your time. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's speaker. So Dr. Carly Kilpatrick is a Senior Conservation Officer with the Great Barrier Reef and Marine Parks Division of the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service and Partnerships. Since 2000, she has been dedicated to help enable the recovery of the critically endangered gray nurse shark. Carly was instrumental in protecting 4 critical gray nurse shark aggregation sites in Queensland, which saw her receive a Queensland Australia Day Award for Conservation in 2004. She completed her PhD on the gray nurse shark in 2009 at the University of Queensland, where she actually remains an adjunct lecturer. Her publications have helped direct conservation management and research efforts abroad. Most recently, in 2018, her Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service team won a Queensland Innovation Award for their project that investigates interactions between divers and gray nurse sharks. Super excited to hear about that. Carly is also a dedicated mother to 2 little wildlife ambassadors. And so thank you so much, Carly, for being able to take the time to talk with us today. This presentation will cover general information about gray nurse sharks, and we'll then delve a little deeper into what we know about their use of Queensland waters, including the site off the Sunshine Coast. Current research and monitoring efforts underway in Queensland will also be highlighted. And to finish off, we're going to talk about options for how you can help our gray nurse populations. So thank you again, Carly, for your time, and over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Well, hopefully this works. Okay, I think we are. Is it up? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Reef Check Australia, for inviting me here to talk to you all tonight. And to all of those who have joined us, it is a little odd not being able to see your faces, but thank you for giving me the time to talk to you a bit about grey nose sharks. Shay, thanks for the introduction. That was very kind. Now, as I said, I started with Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service back in 1998, straight after finishing my honours at the University of Queensland, working on the little cleaner wrasse, Labroides demitiatus. But it was only a few years later that we here in Queensland realised that we need to look into the grey nurse shark in our waters and see if we actually needed to do something about them. My career with Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service has been extremely diverse, and one small part of it, but something I'm most passionate about, has certainly been the work I've been able to do on the grey nose shark. I've also, as mentioned, kind of aligned research when it's not perfectly suited to management with the University of Queensland, and when that hasn't worked to conserve or achieve the aims I've wanted for the grey nose shark, I came to citizen science, which was Grey Nose Shark Watch, as the other, I guess, method out there to help us conserve and work together and collaborate to do what we can for a species such as the grey nose shark. So what I'm talking about tonight is a result of a huge amount of collaboration and a lot of partners. And it's been really great to have a network and such a wonderful team of people, including diving volunteers to work with throughout my almost 20 years now on this species. But first of all, I'm going to kick off with a little one-on-one on grey nurse sharks. It's going to be a little bit brief because I didn't want to, I guess, repeat it for a lot of those who may have heard it from me before and spend a bit more time getting into what we've recently found out on the grey nurse shark in Queensland with some of our most current research. But, okay, there's a challenge. Okay. So the life history. Grey nose sharks are born at about 1 metre in total length. There's mini replicas of the adults, and so they're live-born pups. And it's after about a 9 to 12 month gestation period. In the literature throughout the world, there's a lot of different statements about how old they live, at what age they mature, and how big they grow. But the consensus from a lot of work actually done in New South Wales by our colleague Nick Otway has shown that they're actually probably a lot older than we thought, particularly the females when they actually mature. But the important thing about their life history is that it is case-selected. They're one of the slowest reproducing sharks out there. So with a 9 to 12 month gestation period, they mature quite late, 9 to 12 years, and they can have a maximum of 2 pups every 2 to 3 years. And this life history is selected really well if there wasn't anthropogenic threats. But as you'll learn as we go through, they congregate at sites that are extremely easily to access by divers and fishers and key threatening processes. So this strategy is no longer probably well suited to survival, particularly when a population has been wiped out. So the males mature a little bit younger and smaller at 1.9 to 2.2 metres and 6 to 9 years of age. Their max size is thought to be about 2.7 metres and they live to about 30 years. The females got larger. Nick Otway would certainly say it's 2.6 to 2.7 metres before they reach maturity. The literature out there, says anywhere from 2.2. But the evidence we've seen here in Queensland, New South Wales, are probably aligned to Nick that they're probably a lot bigger and older when they mature here on the Australian East Coast. And they're also thought to live a little longer. Oops. All right. That way. One of the most interesting things about this species is how they reproduce and produce their young. It's embryonic cannibalism, so it's survival of the fittest from the very start. So they have 2 uteruses, and within those uteruses, a number of eggs will become fertilized. And at about 55 millimeters, 5.5 centimeters, they'll hatch out. And the one that is thought, the one that hatches out first and is the biggest and the strongest, will actually consume all the rest of its siblings until it's the only one left in the uterus. So that's why there's only a maximum of 2 that can be born every 2 to 3 years. But after it's finished munching on its siblings, then the mother continues to ovulate and it finishes the rest of its gestation feeding on unfertilized eggs. So it's certainly a unique way to reproduce. I haven't played the footage because it's a little bit gory, but the link which you'll see in the recorded video, if you go to that, you can actually watch these clips and watch the actual video from an ultrasound taken inside a mother sand tiger shark or grey nurse shark, which is interesting for some. Habitat and diet. The grey nurse shark has been found in shallow waters from a couple of meters right out to deep in a couple of 100 meters. Most commonly though, and acoustic data, visual records, satellite telemetry, everything like that has told us that they're spending the majority of their time in coastal waters between 25 and 40 meters in depth. They like to aggregate or congregate around structures. Now this can be artificial, such as shipwrecks, but most commonly along our east coast, it's our rocky reefs and outcrops. At Wolf Rock, during the early parts of their gestation, they actually come right up to the shallows for a few months, which we think is to enhance, to be in that warmer water and to enhance the speed of which their pups develop as well. In a few slides, I forgot to mention, I'll finish this little 101 and then I'm going to open the floor to some questions and also get the polling questions underway as well before I give you their answers. So if you've got any questions, I'll give you time to answer them soon. Their diet is mostly bony fish. They can eat other small sharks and rays. I think I've done a few necropsies on grey nose sharks in my time, and the most interesting one I found was a whole stargazer. When I opened up something, it was just, so they do swallow their prey whole, which is why they're susceptible to swallowing hooks. They don't bite and tear their prey, and it's also why they're not a man-eater. Their dentition is not suited to be able to tear and slice through prey. It's more to swallow it whole. So what drove the grey nose sharks to the brink of extinction. Unfortunately, they're a large shark. They grow to up to 3 or 3+ meters in length. They swim with their mouths slightly agape so you can see their teeth. Still today, when there is the unfortunate shark attacks, more often than not, because you can get such great close-up pictures of grey nose shark, they are the blamed species. So what I'm going to show you now is a little bit of footage about how dramatic, I guess, the culling of what was thought to be the man-eater, even though there wasn't many attacks in the time of those few attacks. So it really was a case of mistaken identity. I've had the opportunity of talking to Ben Crop, talking to Valerie and Ron Taylor, and asking them, you dived as well with these sharks. How did you believe they were man-eaters at the time? You know, did you find them aggressive in the water back then? What was the difference? And no, they said they didn't, but they were led to believe that when they came to the shoreline to feed, that they were aggressive. But they were also the ones that realised first that the grey nose shark was in trouble. They had been wiped out so efficiently, and together actually with the Game Fishing Society, they also realised that they weren't catching them. And talking amongst themselves, they knew that they'd probably pushed this shark beyond the brink of extinction. So remembering that they congregate, so that most of the time they're at these rocky reefs that are easily accessible by boat. When there was a targeted effort to kill them and you could swim straight up to them with a powerhead, it didn't take long. Valerie Taylor told me a story once when she had been asked to do a film commercial and simulate killing a grey nose shark to show how strong this particular product was, and she couldn't find a grey nose to do that video with, which she was grateful for in hindsight. Surveys later on found that over 60+ sites where they used to see large numbers of grey nose sharks, only a handful of those sites could you still see the grey nose shark. But thankfully, people realised that they weren't the man-eater that, for some reason, they thought they were. And the Taylors led the charge with Ben Crop and others to lead the grey nose being the first protected shark in the world. It was only protected in New South Wales waters, but it was the first protected shark in the world. So that was a change. In 1997, which is sometime after the event, it was protected nationally. But unfortunately, there had been no increase in their numbers, which comes back to their case-selected lifestyle and the other impacting factors that were continuing to prevent their population from recovering. But there was some good news. The recovery plan was released in 2002, the first for the grey nose shark. It was a national recovery plan. In 2003, they realised that the grey nose shark population on the east coast of Australia and the west coast of Australia were genetically distinct, and they were separated. The east coast was listed as critically endangered and the west coast as vulnerable. So all the effort really to date, there's been a little bit of effort put on the west coast, and I think while it is vulnerable, it's probably largely unknown as well, that the east coast was dire. As I said, there was 313 sharks counted over a large number of sites. A lot of people argued with me directly at the time and saying, why are we investing in this species? It's too late. There is no chance of it recovering. That was a hard argument to take because, at the time we thought perhaps it was true, but that's not what we did. In Queensland, with Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service and divers in New South Wales did the same in New South Wales, year-round surveys were conducted at all the sites where grey nose sharks were once found to congregate in large numbers, or where there'd been anecdotal evidence that there'd been before. And the idea was to come up with sites that had 5 or more sharks at any one time, and then try and get those sites protected from the remaining key threatening process, which was incidental capture by wreck and commercial fishers. So I'm just trying to remove a comment so I can see, just going back next screen. So there was, as a result of that, there was, sorry, my screen's been blocked, 4 sites in Queensland that were protected, which is Wolf Rock in Great Sandy Marine Park, Cherubs Cave, Henderson Rock, and Flat Rock in Moreton Bay Marine Park. Now, there are plenty other sites in Queensland where we see grey nose sharks, but during those surveys that were undertaken, they were the only ones that had 5 or more at a given time. Sites that I've dived with since are like China Wall, Hutchinson Shoal near Flinders Reef, And the new site on the Sunshine Coast, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, we have known for, since I started work on the grey nurse shark, there's been a couple of sites off the Sunshine Coast where grey nurse sharks were known to congregate, but their GPS coordinates were not given up out of fear of them becoming protected. While we're here, there's different, the grey nurse shark used the sites in Queensland waters and New South Wales waters differently. Wolf Rock is the only known gestation site for the species, and there's sharks there year round, but whether they're the pregnant females or the resting females that are coming to breed and the mature males coming to breed changes depending on the time of year. In New South Wales is where the grey nurse sharks go to pup, and also the males return after breeding and the females rest for 2 to 3 years after pupping. The protection that's been awarded along the east coast of Australia is extremely variable. People hear of critical grey nurse shark aggregation sites and they think they've all got at least a 1 kilometre no-take zone around them. In this figure, if you can see, if you look back later, it's only the ones with a number 1 next to them that have that or more. A lot of them only have very, very small protection zones around them. And some of them, such as Green Island, have actually been taken away as well. So how is the population doing now? They've been protected since 1984 in New South Wales, 1997 around Australia, and now we've got 4 sites protected from fishing and 10 sites protected to varying degrees from key threatening processes in New South Wales. It's hard to tell. Over the years, there's been a large array of different research done, unfortunately, which are not comparable. It's ranged from the visual counts in the early days, where you see the 292 and the 313. And then we started doing some mark recapture studies using cattle rototags on the dorsal fins of sharks. Unfortunately, they only got 1 survey replicate done on that, which revealed probably about 443 sharks with a maximum of 766 sharks at that time, but the tags biofouled, so we couldn't continue those surveys and they were ceased. And that's when I embarked on my PhD, because we'd closed a heap of sites in Queensland and I'd spoken to a lot of commercial and recreational fishermen, and a lot of livelihoods were affected. And in my heart, I needed to make sure that these zones were going to conserve. They're going to make a difference to the grey nurse shark. So while working full time, I also embarked on my PhD under Mike Bennett at the University of Queensland to prove that photo IDs, that the natural spot patterning on their flank could be used to monitor this population through time. Sea Life Aquariums at the sunny coast were kind enough to let me jump in their aquarium once a week for a year and photograph their captive sharks, because one of the theories was, if you're just proving it in the wild, how do you know that they don't change their spots? Or, you need a captive audience to be able to do that with. At the same time, I sought out, a lot of people who are great photographers and have been photographing grey nurse sharks for years and years for their historical photos, and started comparing them to surveys that I was doing or dive shops were doing on my behalf and citizen scientists on my behalf right back then. And we were lucky enough to find plenty of matches and prove that they were stable through time. After the protection was in place and we needed to do about a 5-year review, a population estimate, there was a lot of discussion amongst all stakeholders as to which was the best way forward. Should we do external tagging, visual counts, or photo ID? And all had their pros and cons. But in the end, the stakeholders decided that they should use the photo identification technology. So the Cardno Labs was commissioned by the Commonwealth to undertake surveys similarly to what I was concurrently doing during my PhD along the east coast of Australia. And they decided to do a closed population analysis, whereas I decided to do an open population analysis. And the surveys we did were slightly different. I had 2 years and 4 surveys across the whole east coast of Australia at all known key aggregation sites using photo ID and photo recapture. And they had 1 coastwide survey and then a recapture survey due to weather and a lot of other constraints that you don't have as a PhD student that is working very hard over time. But interestingly, the results turned out very similar. So back in 2008, we both estimated the population to be between, well, probably up to about 2,000 individual sharks. since then, there's been some genetic analysis undertaken using close kin mark recapture and also genome-wide single nucleotide polymorphisms. And the lowest one there is 400. What that means is looking at the number of mature breeding females left in the population. So when you look at the males and the juveniles, it actually comes out quite similar. And while 2,000 sounds like a lot, it's not. Internationally, they would say we'd need at least 5,000 to 10,000 to be considered a healthy population. And the 400 mature breeding females in 2008 still show that at that point in time, we're at a really great risk of losing genetic variability within the East Coast population if we don't continue to conserve them. And we're still learning about shark genetics. So in the future, how we monitor them, the best thing will be photo identification, hopefully coupled with genetic type studies, so we can get this parallel comparison and ground truthing the different techniques. And I forgot to stop for my poll before I told you too much information. So I'm going to have a pause. And are there any questions at this point? And can we launch the polls, please?
I will launch the polls now. I haven't seen any questions come through, so maybe unless someone wants to madly type in a question to us, we can respond to it now. Otherwise, everyone just type your questions. Oh, here we go. There's one, but everyone type your questions and then we can respond to them every now and then. So there's the poll going, so everyone can respond to that. At the same time, I'll read the question to you, Carly. So Andrew read in Sharks of the World by Herbert Fowler Compagno, sorry for the pronunciation, that grey nurses have large brains. What does that mean? Does it make them more intelligent?
Good question. There's plenty of neuroscientists on sharks out there, and I'm not one of them, but I did share the lab with them. My understanding is, like a lot of animals, the size of the brain, it's not necessarily based on intelligence. Depending which part of the brain is big, it could mean that deep water species have better eyesight. Those in the shallows might have better electrosensory and smell. It's really dependent on where they're living and what their focus of feeding is and how exposed they are to predators. The natural predators of the grey nurse are really the great white and other large coastal species, so they don't have a lot of predators out there. Intelligence is a funny one with animals because they don't talk back. So it's really hard to gauge. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one out. Certainly, I'd say the size of their brain would vary on how well a shark sees, feeds, can avoid predators, and how well suited it is to its particular environment. Maybe more so than how intelligent it is compared to other species of sharks.
Cool, thank you. And another one from Michael. Is there any ongoing research into population genetics on the East Coast or somewhere we can read more about that? Do you recommend anywhere they can find more information?
There's a couple of reports out and published, but there's no ongoing research. I would certainly hope we're coming up, like the other thing I didn't mention about the genetic studies is they have a bit of a lag. They can use models to hypothesize how much the population will grow over time based on what they found. But the data was based, again, it's similar to ours, it was 2008. So all of our estimates to date are, over 10 years old. So we really need to get back out there and do another photo identification survey and genetics alongside that, particularly because the genetics side is so new that we need to ground truth it as well. So yeah, I don't know if there's some way to post the articles later for people.
You can send them to us and we'll find a way to spread it. Yeah,
and I'm not sure if they're I know the Cardno one is accessible online, but some of the others you need to pay for them or with the universities, but I can certainly provide them.
Yeah, great, thank you. And from James, is there any scope to close more areas to fishing?
Not at this stage that I'm aware of. It's another one that protecting moving or migrating sharks is really, really tricky. The grey nurse shark is actually fortunate, and the best way is to protect sharks that congregate at their key sites, their breeding sites, their nursery areas and things like that. So I feel that is one good step, but we can't protect the whole ocean. So it's making we choose wisely, and I'm going to talk a little bit more later about what we did to start with was based on a central coordinate, and how much we knew the sharks moved around that central coordinate. Understanding each aggregation site rather than having one method or one set of rules to protect grey-nosed sharks at every site is really important. And so, you know, doing the work at these sites to track their movements throughout the year and then designing the marine protected areas accordingly to protect them is probably the next step, as well if we find some missing sites. But again, I'm going to talk more on that a little bit later. Certainly key sites to their recovery, breeding sites, nursery areas, yeah, are going to be important if there is the political will.
Really? Alrighty.
Rock is coming up on top. I wonder how many Queenslanders we have out there. Did you have a poll at the start to see where everyone...
Oh, we do have one available. Yeah,
we have one, yeah. I can launch that quickly if you'd like. But Wolf Rock came in at the top, and then Wabi Rock.
And we've got a few other questions, but we'll get to them in the next round if you want, so we can keep
I wouldn't mind doing them now, only because otherwise I'm going to give them the answers.
Okay, alrighty. So what have we got? So we've got that poll going, so we'll leave that one. Do you have numbers on the individuals at Wolf Rock, and do they migrate or stay local?
Oh, that's a question. You're launching the polls. Yeah, I'm going to talk a lot about Wolf Rock coming up, so I'm hesitant what I'm going to say now. We know about 50% of the breeding population utilise Wolf Rock, and it could be a little bit more. So if we think there's 400 mature females out there in 2008, if the population is, say, increasing at about 1%, you know, maybe we hope there's about 500 females on the east coast of Australia and maybe 250 of them using Wolf Rock.
Right.
Well, you're only seeing the numbers of 40 at a time. This is what makes me think there's a lot of other missing gestation sites out there. I think the maximum we've probably visually counted is about 70. There's a lot of other country around Wolf Rock, which is part of the greater Wolf Rock area that we're hoping they're using. More research required. It's easier to answer how many females we think are in the population and versus how many are, you know, using Wolf Rock.
Right. Okay. And just one last one about having grey-nosed sharks, I think, been spotted at Mooloolaba. I think there was some there recently.
Yes, yeah. There's a site called the Tunnels or Wabi Rock where they've been seen, and as I mentioned a little earlier, when we did our surveys and when I did my PhD looking at all anecdotal sites, a lot of locals were telling me about sites off the Sunshine Coast, one off Curramundi and one somewhere off the Sunshine Coast with no further details. I offered to be blindfolded to go out and have a look and take my blindfold off on the back, but they wouldn't do that. But the photos, they did show me photos of, you know, aggregations of up to 20 grey-nosed sharks in a site that does look very, very similar to the tunnels, which is kind of in between the inner and outer nearings off the Sunshine Coast. But that doesn't mean there's not other sites like it.
Mm-hmm. And do you know if there's any at HMAS Brisbane?
Yeah, we get the odd sighting every year. However, it's not an aggregation site. There's a lot of sites where sharks just might stop off on their way through to other sites.
Right. Cool. Thank you. That's all the questions up to date for now. So feel free to carry on and we'll get.
And the polling I can switch through, can't I? To see.
Yeah, so the vast majority are from Queensland, as suspected.
Yeah, have we asked the other polling questions?
No, but we can do.
Not
yes,
yet.
just submit.
Recovery now, I'll ask that. If everyone wants to jump on and answer this one, please.
What do you think has recovered?
Perfect answer. Well done, everyone. I wish they had, though. There's a lot of things I'd love to do that I probably hold back on because I need to get this species off the critically endangered list, if at all possible.
What a good challenge to set yourself. So we've got...
And the last one?
There we go. Yeah,
great.
Just so everyone can see the results. So 16 said yes and 62 said no. And the last one. Oh, what happened? There we go. Northern extent. So for everyone answering, we get to see all the answers coming in and the bar graphs changing.
Yeah, great.
Okay. That's a pretty even one, that one.
I'm glad I had to get this one out before I moved on. So that's good. Okay, I'll go to the next level that keeps on going.
Yeah.
Just move that out of the way. So why after 15 years of protection are they still critically endangered? It's incidental capture by recreational commercial fishermen. A few are caught in the shark control program, but it's primarily that. But it's also something that people don't think about very often. It's not just direct incidental capture, it's the fish we let away with the hooks inside of them that they will then also feed on, particularly at these key aggregation sites not protected. When we actively tracked some grey nose shark at Flat Rock many years ago, I'll never forget, the sharks had not left the gutter. We were just sitting on top of the gutter, and this was for 24 hours and a small tender, and then all of a sudden the grey nose shark we were tracking made a beeline straight for another boat about 1.2 kilometres away underneath. And it was just interesting to see how far they will move from resting and just hovering around for an opportunistic feed. We don't know whether that boat was burling up as well or just fishing. There's been similar studies done in New South Wales which show virtually any type of fishing gear, this pole, unfortunately they will opportunistically feed on. A lot of people say, well, they don't take a lure. They do, but they might not come to the surface to take that lure if you're trolling. But unfortunately, as soon as you catch a fish, they make a beeline for the bottom to try and escape. It's their natural behaviour. And if a grey nose is around in the vicinity, they're going to take that fish. So you can see a lot of recreational and commercial type gear here. The tail ropes we still get. We actually think that's from a commercial fishery that's trying to do the right thing. They're releasing the sharks alive, but unfortunately we've seen a few sharks out there with scoliosis with bent spines, and one of them I actually had taken a photo of them, photo ID again, its benefits, without a rope around its tail, normal spine, and then we had a photo of its tail with its rope around it, and a few years later it got the scoliosis. So they're not meant to be hung up out of their water. Their bodies are meant to be supported by water. So this release method is probably doing damage to some of them, not all of them, to their spines, but it also, the slip notes aren't working. And I know New South Wales Fisheries was going to try and work with this particular industry to try and come up with a better technique to release them and a better knot system, because those ropes do end up, you know, basically cutting their tail off, getting septicemia, getting bad injuries as well. So there's a lot to be done, and I just hope that there's a lot of, I guess, time and effort in the future put into fishing technologies, put into, you know, we're going to need, people are going to continue to fish recreationally and commercially. It's coming up with things that any bycatch we release with hooks inside them, if they're then predated on, aren't going to affect that predator, but also their target species. You know, everyone wants the fish you release because they're undersized to survive, so it's not just about releasing them as quickly and healthy as possible. And I know there's been some dissolvable hooks and there has been some moves forwards in this, but no one wants to use them. And I question myself, can we do better? There's a lot of smart people out there. And once we've got the best, what do we do to make people actually embrace it? Does it need to be legislated and become a rule, or people look after their own industry, look after their passion out there, recreationally fishing, and try and do the right thing? Because it's going to have a massive benefit to so many species out there in our ocean if we can stop this. That's my little rant on that one. And you can see in this bottom row of pictures, that was just a tiny recreational hook in figure A. And that wound healed. These ones I'm showing you here, these are all external injuries. A lot of these sharks will survive. It's the internal injuries when the hooks are actually swallowed that the sharks, a high percentage of the time, will not survive from. The spiral valve, which is like the stomach or the small intestine for the grey nose shark, is spiral. If a hook makes it to that part of the body, it definitely can't survive. The sharks are migrating from different organs in the body. We've seen them up near their brain from being swallowed. It's just incredible what damage these hooks can do. So next, I'm going to move on to some different methods we've used to do the research along the east coast of Australia. The photo identification, I've talked to you about that. We've proven that it's stable through time. It's great for citizen science. It's great for people like you to get out there and take your opportunistic photos at sites and submit them to citizen science groups like Grey Nurse Shark Watch, and also to us for photos in Queensland. And I've got website and email addresses at the end. And then the scheduled surveys, which Grey Nurse Shark Watch used to do, and I'm hoping it will get back to, but there's a technological challenge at the moment in that there's so many photos coming in. Grey Nurse Shark Watch has, 10, 20,000 photos backlog, which it can't process. Because at the moment, they've got to be done by eye. There is some algorithms out there which make the process a lot simpler, and there's plenty of papers out there analysing their accuracy, and they all have their flaws. And I've been having some discussions lately with some bright-minded people, and we're really hoping that we can get into the machine learning phase so that we can couple these algorithms with the various metadata and machine learning to make this process a lot quicker, so we can really take full advantage of photos, because it can answer so many things that other technologies such as acoustic and satellite tagging cannot. They all hold their place, as I'm going to try and tell you over the next few slides. But to me, photos really are priceless. We can get so much information from drawing on your photos from social media, which has been done from others around the world. And I would love to see it all open, so anyone can see the photos of Grey Nurse sharks, but also so our schools get into the STEM side of things. Our schools and universities can start to help with quality assurance. And I actually provided a group of photos to a Year 12 maths subject for a mark recapture exercise. A lot of schools around Australia did. So there's lots of different great things we can do to educate people about conservation, as well as tap into maths and science. And I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for citizen science as well, but also for the scheduled researchers to do other hard work as well. So please, if you're taking photos, keep them stored for date and site. Even if they're not getting processed, they will one day. And if we don't have the data in the first place, we can't make use of them. So that's the key message there. So what have we learned from photos alone? This is before we started doing a lot of acoustic and satellite telemetry. We actually learnt more, and we broke a lot of the rules that people thought existed for the Grey Nurse sharks movement and migration. For one, they thought all adult or mature sharks came into Queensland waters in winter and stayed in New South Wales or southern waters in summer. And we now know from photos and divers using these sites and providing those photos that that's not the case. So we have our pupping and nursery areas are in New South Wales waters. And I know a lot of people say, oh, there's been pupping on the Sunshine Coast, there's nursery areas. There's not. There's always outliers. There's always a shark that for some reason has not made it back to New South Wales to pup, or maybe it's had an encounter with fishing gear and it's pupped early. But the actual nursery areas, the key pupping sites, are in New South Wales waters. The only known gestation site, as I've mentioned, is Wolf Rock. Mating occurs late in the year, around November. And this is another one. People see photos of sharks with mating scars or mating-like scars. I've seen juvenile pups with mating-like scars, and I've seen subadults with mating-like scars, and I've seen sites with just males with mating-like scars. They can't talk, they can't communicate, so sorting out their hierarchy leading up to the mating system and feeding hierarchy, they also can have some interactions amongst themselves as well that aren't true mating behaviours. However, when mating occurs, you'll see every shark at this site, male and female, is covered in quite deep, fresh mating scars. It is distinct and it does stand out. And we've seen it in Aquaria as well, and it does tend to be around that November, late October, November through to early December, and you can almost plot it to where the full moon lies as to where the peak mating will occur. So there is, there's definitely pre-mating behaviour with Grey Nurse sharks and other sharks. The male will follow a female around just under her tail for a while, and this can happen weeks before mating actually occurs. And so we do see that certainly at Flat Rock. And I do know mating also occurs out off Moreton Island at Cherubs and Henderson Rock, and it certainly does occur at Wolf Rock. But it occurs at a lot of other sites we don't know about as well, because the number of sharks we're seeing at these sites doesn't equate to the number of sharks in the mature population of grey nurse along the east coast of Australia. And I believe that's probably from our neck of the woods here in Brisbane right up until the Great Barrier Reef areas up there. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more later. Is there any questions about this? Because this is something you can talk about, and it is quite complex.
We've got a few questions. Do you mean specifically about the photo ID?
Yeah, all the movements of grey nose sharks along around.
Yep. So we've got a few. So during the mating season, do their levels of aggression towards non-grey nose species change?
Not that I've seen. I have seen their behaviour towards divers change.
Right.
And not necessarily in a bad way, but they're a lot more inquisitive. I say they're a bit like adolescents, naughty children, rather than their normal, calm, placid selves. They're a bit more energised, is the way I could put it.
Yeah. And can you tell us what a mating scar looks like?
It's one thing I should have put a photo on. If you remind me at the end, I'm just trying to think of the quickest way to show you one. It's something can we post later? Yeah, it's
yeah, sure.
You can imagine it's teeth bones. The grey nose shark bite is quite distinct. It's not like a big tear, but sometimes you do get little tears. But it's from the pec fins on their flank. Will be quite red when they're fresh. They look quite oozy. As they heal, they go to white, and then eventually the scars will turn quite black. But they can be from lots of little pierced holes around the fin up on the flank of the shark. Actually, I can try. Can I do this? Can you see my arrow? No, you can't see that. Yeah, okay, that's not going to work.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
We've got
a picture would be best if I could somehow, put up a picture at the end of this where people are talking.
Yeah. We can try and make that happen. Well, but at the end, maybe anyway, we'll get to there. A few other questions unrelated to migration or photos, if you don't mind taking them now.
That's fine.
Yep. So we've got a question from Holly, age 5. Do shark teeth drop out and then get new ones like we do?
More.
Wow.
One chance at that. The shark's teeth continually rotate, yes, and if you're diving at a grey nose shark aggregation site or in the aquarium, you'll routinely see lots and lots and lots of their teeth on the ground. They do go through weeks or small periods where they don't feed, and their teeth may not fall out as much as that, but they are continually turned over. So they certainly don't have to brush and floss them as much as we do.
Good to know. They might have trouble with that anyway. Can we help the grey nose sharks by removing the nets?
The grey nose sharks aren't caught compared to a lot of species in large numbers in the nets. Now they used to be, so it might be a factor of their population being so low. At Rainbow Beach, they moved the net and rearranged the location. It's definitely going to help. Is it going to make the population increase and recover? No, it's not the key threatening processes. The numbers are small. Will it make a difference overall? Yes, but I don't know if statistically we tell. But yeah, it is a threatening process to the grey nose shark. Okay,
thank you. And a question from Andrew. He said that they are so docile and beautiful, it is very difficult as a diver not to pat, stroke, or even hug. Would this do them any harm?
No, but they might do you some harm. They are, exactly what you say is 100% true. But if you wave a bit of meat in front of a chihuahua, or if you've got a bad-tempered child, or any animal, they are a wild animal, and they're not possibly going to bite your leg off, but they can certainly do some damage, and that's going to do them damage and their reputation damage. So it's worth the risk.
Yeah, thank you. We had some discussion about the Ben Crop film and Powerheads, so people can read that. Someone suggested it would be great to share lectures like this with EHP and Fisheries and New South Wales Facebook pages, because a lot of fishers might not be aware of the impact that their fishing gear is having. So that's a great idea. And we've had a few people have messaged me to say that they've got contacts to share it. So it's all being recorded. So we'll publish it, edit it, and then it can be shared widely. Another question, is there any research or projects to increase the grey nurse shark genetic variations since they were reduced to such low numbers in the past?
There's plenty of genetic research, and there's been work done on other species around the world. It's really tricky when you bring a species in from another location, so the same species but from another location. There can be diseases that aren't in your population. So it's kind of one of those last resorts, and I don't think we're there yet. I think I'm hoping that we don't need to go there, particularly for the East Coast population. There may be other places around the world where their populations are really, really worse than ours that might consider it. But yeah, I'd say the research is there. They would certainly mix. If you brought grey shark from the West Coast to the East Coast to increase the genetic diversity, and they survived and, you know, could navigate and move their way around, which we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns that it could work, but the risks involved make it's probably not the priority.
Right, thank you. I think, one more has snuck in. Has plastic pollution added to the decimation of populations from Queensland? Is there any evidence of that?
No, I haven't seen any evidence of plastics in the grey nurse sharks. However, if you talk into microplastics, no, I have no idea. And I know Nick Otway in New South Wales is doing a lot with the diets and finding a lot of nasty toxins in the blood, particularly mature females that are coming from their food source, which are adjacent to some of the the sewage outlet plants in New South Wales. There's a lot of potential for it. And I'd say, if we did do that study, or if someone did, you could find it, but nothing that I've seen personally.
Okay. Thank you. That's all our questions. We're up to date, so we can check back in a little while.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, let's scoot on. Oh, this is video for you. That's why. So the next method I'm going to talk about is acoustic telemetry. We've used this to look at the presence and absence and the use of critical aggregation sites in Queensland and New South Wales. And we use either internal tagging or external tagging. Internal is preferable, even though you saw that processing is quite invasive. All the sharks have survived. New South Wales internally tagged, I think, nearly 40 sharks almost 10 years ago, and there was records of them all on the acoustic receivers. And unfortunately, the tag life is 10 years, and we're still getting the detections now, but we've got 1 or 2 years left before they all run out. In 2018, we tagged 8 grey nurse sharks internally with the help of SeaWorld. Well, SeaWorld did the tagging. We just helped select the sharks and help that side of it with their veterinary expertise. And our staff and research volunteers did the external tagging. And when that's preferred it's much easier and quicker. We use a Hawaiian sling and we go down on the diver with the diver, and we have a free swimming shark. We don't need to capture that shark, so we can tag a lot more. However, the sharks shake these tags free really, really quickly. So we might only get a day, a week, 2 weeks, and at best case, a year of data from these sharks. And the tags are extremely expensive. So our preferred option is internal tagging. What questions can we answer? Well, obviously a lot more from internal tags. But one short-term question we were asking recently comes from the designated grey nose shark areas, which are prescribed in the Moreton Bay Marine Park and the Great Sandy Marine Park zoning plans. And they're in there to protect grey nose sharks' key habitat from, well, protect their key habitat and also protect the grey nose sharks from key threatening processes such as scuba diving, and also fishing is completely protected, but we need to manage scuba diving. So we need to be able to demonstrate that divers aren't causing the grey nose sharks to leave these protected waters and go to areas where they can be fished and incidentally captured, and B, that any localized impact is acceptable. It's something we can tolerate. So how we did this was we actually tagged divers and sharks. We made the dive leaders of the dive shops and our research divers clip on an acoustic tag to their BCD, and we internally and externally tagged sharks. And then you can look at these little positions here. You see these acoustic receivers. They can triangulate either the diver or in this case the shark's position with extreme accuracy down to a few centimeters. So we had to deploy a lot of them. So at Flat Rock, the green dots are all the detections of scuba divers, both from dive shops and research divers over the duration of the study that was done in Flat Rock. And the purple dots are the tagged grey nose sharks. Some are internally tagged many, many years ago from New South Wales Fisheries, and are some that we tagged either internally or externally. The yellow big dots are the positions of the receivers. The ones close to the rock structure are part of the array. That's within the two key aggregation sites at Flat Rock, known as Turtle Cave and the Shark Alley. And interesting, this is quite a crude overall analysis, but you can see that while the diver movements is more constricted, that the sharks certainly have not left that outer area. And this is every single detection throughout the study period, which was over a 6-month period, which was really, really great news to see. When you look at a fine scale, you can see, and divers will tell you this study, because people started whinging, I never get to see a shark, I'm not the first person in the water. And divers will be honest and say, you know, if there's been diving all day, okay, well the sharks are no longer in their little key aggregation site. But we needed to know that they're not leaving their waters, that they have their little hidey holes where they can seek respite if they need to. And that's what the analysis at this stage is showing us. We're going to take it a lot further, and one of my UQ colleagues is a legend at R coding, and he's going to take it to the level where every single detection from the moment the diver gets in the water, we're going to look at the distance between the diver and the shark at the start of that interaction to the end, and really investigate this at a fine scale, just so we know and we can make management recommendations with minimal impact to divers, but also encourage the best opportunity to enjoy these sharks as everyone wants to. So moving on to Wolf Rock, I'm just going to show you this site for those who haven't dived it and help you understand why it is a favourite by many. That should say of gestating grey nose sharks as well, not just aggregation. So these are all pregnant females prior to their departure back to New South Wales to pup. So the acoustic tagging not only has told us about the interactions between divers and grey nose sharks, it's also, thanks to the help of a third-year student, told us a lot more about the use of these protected waters, because we've been able to get their fine-scale movements. But this is just a little look again at divers and grey nose sharks at Wolf Rock. And we haven't done this level of analysis for Flat Rock, so I'm still waiting on some data on dive logs to compare with their tags. But again, it's the same story. The grey nose shark actually has a naturally greater movement pattern around the area than the divers, but they're not leaving that outer boundary of the designated grey nose shark area and being exposed to their key threatening processes. So this second figure here shows grey nose shark detections only on the diving and non-diving days, and I've extracted the data from just 6 AM to 6 PM, so it wasn't at night for all these marks. So obviously the grey nose sharks are still there at night, but the impact from diving is less. But again, we're interrogating this data a lot more, but at the early onset, it's good news. And I mentioned briefly that we use this data to also look at the use of these marine protected areas for the grey nurse shark. And from my PhD days, we did some active tracking of the grey nurse sharks, which was only for 24 hours. This has allowed us to track their movements in quite fine scale for 6 months plus. And we've also looked at the bathymetry in the surrounding area. If you remember before, I said wolf rock is the only known gestation period. And that I've photo identified only 50% of mature females at Wolf Rock. The other 50% I've photo identified have been at other sites along the east coast of Australia, either on their way to New South Wales to pup or their way to Queensland to breed and gestate. And the evidence has just kept mounting and mounting as to why I think there's a missing gestation site. But what we don't know is it, if you can look at I wish I had a pointer. In the grey map, the bits in the centre that look like they are the highest are the pinnacles of Wolf Rock.
I can see your pointer now, Carly. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Shai, can you see it? Her little mouse?
Mouse?
Oh, yes, I can see it.
We've got
perfect.
it now. So you do have a pointer.
That's fantastic.
Your prayers have been answered.
Okay, so the Wolf Rock main pinnacles are just this area here, and then there's the boulder country out here. But this whole area out here is other country, and when we look at these figures down here, this is showing kind of like a centre of activity that the grey nose sharks are using around this site. And a lot of their excursions are actually towards this country out here. Not because of divers, but we're just showing that maybe the sharks that we're not photographing are just here, or are they elsewhere? The other thing I thought in my PhD days is that they were spending 9 to 12 months the whole time of their gestation at Wolf Rock, because I was photographing them, or diving citizen scientists were photographing the same sharks over and over and over at this site. Through this tagging study, we know that the sharks are having many excursions. Sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's been up to 60 plus days away from Wolf Rock and then coming back. That seems strange to me for them not to be detected on the array close around the site, which means, again, where are they going? How far are they travelling? And are these sites protected from their key threatening process? How much time are they exposed? Moving on to Amakua. She's a rescued grey nose shark. She had this fish spike protruding out from her side that was seen by John Gransbury, a well-known diver by many and also an advocate for all citizen science programs. He alluded or told me about this shark, and then a rescue effort was made, and SeaWorld came and captured the shark, and it was quite extensive surgery, so they decided to take the shark back to SeaWorld to rehabilitate it before releasing it back at Flat Rock in August 2015, 2 weeks later. All the little yellow dots on this map show you the movements of this grey nose shark. So it's recovered. These have been, from July 2015, it recovered from this surgery, and we've seen it most recently in March 2020 off Sydney. And there's been heaps of detections. All the yellow dots can be sometimes, thousands of detections at each of these sites. What's interesting to me, it only made its first trip back to Flat Rock after its release in 2018. Its size at the time was probably leading towards maturity, maybe not quite mature. So I'm hoping that we see this shark back again soon. But did she go from Flat Rock to somewhere else? Is she not one of our Wolf Rock sharks? Has she going to one of these missing gestation sites? So we'll only continue to see her at Flat Rock, and then she'll disappear until we detect her again in New South Wales waters when she's pupping and resting. Again, another unknown. More evidence that has lent me to think the sites in Queensland we don't know about. Satellite tagging done by New South Wales Fisheries. If you look at these images of shark 1, 2, 3 and 4, particularly sharks 1, 3 and 4, 1 and 4 are right up at the top here in this purple map around, can you see my mouse? Guthrie Shoals, Douglas Shoals and Ames. The satellite tags popped off around here, and they'd spent 30 plus days in that area. Another one popped off Indian Head off Fraser Island, and I've had a lot of people tell me they've caught grey nurse or we need to investigate sites off there. several years ago now, we actually got some funding, a challenge grant, to really have a serious look at this. And we put baited remote underwater cameras down. We put acoustic receivers down at all of these green dots. We first did a desktop GIS study looking at bathymetry, what sites were similar to Wolf Rock to investigate, and scuba diving surveys and everything, but nothing came up, unfortunately, even though many of them had anecdotal sightings. Most recently, this bad clip here is actually a receiver that part of a Queensland acoustic array has been put out here at the site of the Sunshine Coast, the tunnels or Wobby Rock. So we're hoping to learn more about that site, but what I do know is it's not going to be our missing gestation site. It is a really important site, and I think it's perhaps as important as Flat Rock, Cherubs and Henderson Rock in Moreton Bay Marine Park in the way it is used by grey nurse sharks, but it's not a gestation site like Wolf Rock. The next little piece of evidence, and quietly I'm hoping that they have another gestation site at a majestic spot like Lady Island or Heron Island, is we've had a lot of sightings since 2012 at Lady Elliot, and one tagged shark was detected on an acoustic receiver at Heron Island. We've had all the females up until this year sighted there had mating scars, and then this one was sighted, the most recent was in August this year. And my mating scar photos. Sorry, the question, you can see here, this is probably not in the full swing of mating, but there's certainly been some mating activity going on. If you can imagine the whole flank here of this shark covered in wounds like that, and then looking a little more red than white, that's giving you an indication of what the mating scars would look like. So again, here there's been some interaction, but I wouldn't say a proper mating event has actually happened for these sharks. But the one in August this year, she could be pregnant. All the others have been in November, which is when we know mating happens, which is why I say there's mating sites up around this area of Queensland, and we just don't know where they are. Are these sharks on their way back after mating, or is there somewhere close to Lady Elliot? Is there the sharks aggregating for the breeding period as well? Again, more questions to be answered. And I'm hoping that the Queensland government has just supported IMOS, an international array of various oceanography and animal tracking systems, to put a Queensland acoustic array down. And there's already quite a large number in Queensland, but we're going to get, probably a couple of hundred more, which we're really, really hoping will help answer some of these questions about where the grey nurse shark are using. And the biggest challenge is making sure we've got enough internally tagged grey nurse shark to be detected, as those ones tagged 10 years ago as battery life run out. But this acoustic array is not just about grey nurse sharks, it's about a huge array of species. The Department of Agriculture and Fisheries is investing in it by looking at the societal species of sharks. They're putting out receivers adjacent to their shark drum lines to see what sharks are detected there. And grey nurse sharks have been detected along the east coast as these receivers as they migrate through as well. There's plenty of fisheries species, so a lot of your pearl perch, mullet, snapper. There's a lot of information we're going to get: turtles, dugong, manta rays, leopard sharks, and a whole suite of species from this acoustic array. So it's really, really exciting from a marine science and conservation point of view to understand for the first time a lot about their movements and migration. Have we got any questions at this point? Yeah?
Yeah, there's a couple. One is about migrating. Does water or atmospheric temperatures affect migratory patterns? If so, how?
Water temperature, again, there's no science. I can't say to you we have the evidence which says that at this temperatures they migrate or not. It's just we know when they move and the water temperatures change. There's kind of sweet spots. So the females gestating at Wolf Rock are different. So again, your juvenile sharks do not migrate at all. It's not until they're subadult so they start to move. They're actually quite restricted in their distribution to mid to southern New South Wales waters. So they're not affected by temperature so much until they get bigger. But then as they become subadult and they start to move with temperature, they start that migration and move a little bit forward, further, still mostly within New South Wales waters. It's not until the adult sharks really use that and start to move into Queensland waters for the breeding season but then the males move back straight after breeding. So again, the temperature side of it, I think it's more about the currents.
Right.
So when they time, so when all the sharks move differently. The mature males come up first to Queensland to breed, and the rested females come up slightly after them in general. There's always outliers. And then the pregnant females actually go back before the breeding season. So it's the temperature's all out of whack, and I'm sure all of that has influenced them, but not as much as the currents. And when they do the big movements towards Queensland, it seems to be onshore, stopping at all the key aggregation sites. Whereas with the males on the way back, we think it might be more offshore, following the currents as they zoom back quite quickly to New South Wales waters as well.
Right. Cool. Lots of questions, like you said, about what's actually happening. Do you know if the breeding season coincides with the whale migration? Because you mentioned what time of the year the breeding season was. So how does that relate?
No, it's after. It's in November. So, you know, I mean, the whale season starts, I think, as early around May. I think the peak season's in winter, and certainly the mating doesn't occur until around late October to early December. So it's kind of outside of that season.
Mm-hmm. And have you noticed, or has science noticed any poleward shifts with temperature, like the water temperature changes?
Particularly at the extremities. We haven't seen anything at Wolf Rock, but at the other extreme in southern New South Wales, Montague Island used to have a very restricted period of use by grey nurse sharks, and they've only got a seasonal closure there for a few months of the year as well. And a lot of the local dive operators now have evidence just saying that the sharks are using that for longer and longer each year, and that's been over a 20-year period that they've started collecting that data. So yeah.
Nice.
We would expect. I am a little bit nervous about Wolf Rock, as well, until we find the gestation site. If it gets too hot, what will happen? Where will they move to? And why aren't sites like Cherubs and Henderson Rock suitable as gestation sites? What's so special about Wolf Rock? And I think it's oceanic. Wolf Rock is just loved by a whole suite of species, but what if it's no longer loved? What are they going to do?
Okay, thank you. This one's a bit different. If you could give this talk to any audience, what audience do you think would you target to have the greatest impact on the conservation of grey nurse sharks right now?
I would target my talk differently for the different audiences. So a specific talk, I think it's a general audience. I'm trying to cover a little bit for everyone. Ideally, I think our younger generation is there, tapping into the school systems, but also the stakeholders. I'm working with stakeholders rather than against them to make sure they can do everything in their power to keep doing what they want to do with minimal impact on species such as the grey nurse. But again, it's not this talk. I would target it to make it meaningful for them as well.
Mm-hmm. And what audience do you think having that conversation would have the biggest impact on the conservation?
Right in the future, again, the younger generations. Right now, it's the recreational and commercial fishermen. It's being able to work with them to come up with alternative methods, or it's actually probably scientists, innovators, as I said, to come up with techniques to allow people to keep doing what they want to do without impacting so much on grey nurse and other species.
Yeah. Oh, and like you alluded to earlier, it's the partnership and collaboration with so many stakeholders to make this, to find a solution to such a complex problem.
Yeah.
I think, like you just said, we did have someone comment who's a teacher asking for a copy of the lecture. So I've got her email address. So I wonder if you'd be able to send me, whether it's this or a modified version to use. She said that she would love to show this information to her students, and they would really enjoy it. So if you're able to share anything with us, we've got a few people asking about it, or if you can direct them to somewhere else where they can get resources.
Yeah, sure. They've got my email addresses up on this page, actually. And I think you also said you saved this talk to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so it's recording, and we'll be publishing it. We'll edit it down, and then we'll publish it, and we can let people know when that's available.
Yeah, but otherwise get in touch, and it's something I've always thought we should do, is have a few standardised talks out there to make available for everybody as well to use when we can't get out and about, and certainly in the current world as we know it.
Yeah, and that's what's so good about this too. We're able to reach so many people, because usually we're hosted at Sunshine Coast at Sea Life Madoolaba, which is brilliant, and we do miss that. But at least one side benefit of being online is that people everywhere can join in, so that's exciting.
Yeah. So a little where to from here. I've touched on all of these things, but I would love to find the missing gestation site or sites, and also just learn more about their use in Queensland waters. I think we've actually, we've concentrated on the Southern Marine Park quite a lot, but we also don't know a lot about other sites in Moreton Bay Great Sandon Marine Park that aren't protected and how they're being used, just to learn about the connectiveness. And as we said, these sharks do congregate. So how much along the whole east coast of Australia of their time are they protected versus are they not? Is it enough? Have we got the formula right now? So continuing on that journey to understand that. I am talking with experts about the photo ID, and I really hope in the next year or two that the whole way we manage a lot of threatened species and way we can work with citizen scientists will become a lot more accessible and a lot more fast and efficient, and therefore put out the results really, really quickly for conservation managers as well. And finally, we definitely want to continue the internal tagging. The different methods all serve a purpose to bring the bigger picture of what we can learn about these species together. So internal tagging of grey nose shark, particularly while we have this hugely exciting Queensland acoustic array going in, is something I'm hoping will continue. And actually got funding to do some satellite and internal tagging a couple of years ago, but it got stopped last year and due to field constraints, and then this year due to COVID. So I'm hoping we can actually embark on that again. And satellite tagging hasn't been successful in the past. They shape the tags off like the external tags, but some colleagues of mine have come up with a method to stitch them in place. So we should actually get a really good 6-month run. So I'm hoping that combined with everything else, we might stand the best chance yet of finding this missing gestation site in Queensland. So that's it. And please get involved. As I said, your photos do help, even if we can't process them and give you answers. Keeping them as long as their date and location stored to have that information into the future to look back on is priceless.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. Shai and I can clap for everyone because I'm sure they'll be silently clapping.
Thank you, Carly. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you so much.
Most welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. I think we've got all the questions, so I'll leave it to everyone says they're clapping out loud and thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll leave it to Shai now to wrap up.
Yeah, so we honestly thank you so much for your time, Carly. We really appreciate it. That was a really interesting talk. I loved it, and I have a ton of questions that I'll email you through. We've got some great comments coming in. Karen said, really loving that these talks are available online, and this has been such an interesting and inspiring talk. Not many good things have come from COVID, but this has definitely been one of the exceptions of the bonus. So yeah, thank you again, and look out for a little care package that we'll be sending you in the mail. So we'll be in touch regarding that. And if anybody has any questions they want to ask Dr. Kilpatrick, you can send it to our email address and we'll forward it on, or if you wrote down her email, it was available on an earlier slide, and we'll post the video on YouTube after we've edited a couple things. And then yeah, that should be it. Anything else, Renee? Are we good?
I think we're good. Carly, did you have any closing comments or?
I guess just one thank you to everyone that's been a part of my grey nose shark journey. If they're listening or watch this in the future, from today I had a colleague pull out some maps for me because computer programs weren't being my friend. I included it last night.
Technology, always.
Technology, but networks and working together from citizen science from every aspect, it just makes it possible. It makes things happen. So keep part and helping.
Yeah, them. The hunt for the missing gestation site or sites. We'll all chip in. So yeah, thanks again, Carly. Really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for the great talk. Thank you everybody for joining. Thanks. And we'll see you next month, hopefully.
Yep, we'll be here, so we hope you will too.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening.